Greetings, friends, and welcome back to Biblical Hebrew through implicit elaborative learning methods. This Biblical Hebrew is based off of 12 principles. It is not that complicated, and as hopefully you have learned in the last video, it is very quick and it gets us to reading the text so we might be able to nourish our souls with the Word of God. This is lesson 2, where we're actually going to be discussing the concept of the Aleph-Bet, not to be confused with the alphabet. And so let's talk about the letters and the pointing system within Biblical Hebrew. So let's dive right in. This is the Aleph-Bet chapter for us today. Aleph-Bet is based off of the concept of letters, pronunciations, sounds, things of that sort. But really quickly, let's talk about the history of writing and the alphabet and how we ended up getting it, or the Aleph-Bet, if we want to talk about it that way. Ancient writing, as many of you have learned in history courses or seen on television or something of that sort, began with what you see here on screen called pictographs. There's some ancient pictographs in caves in France and other places of that sort where they were drawing things as you see here on the screen. And these different images were told stories by painting and things of that sort. And this is much akin to how children begin their drawing and writing. They begin their drawing and writing by, pictograph style. They will draw mommy and daddy with stick figures, often kind of very questionable stick figures. Nevertheless, they're doing it to tell a story. Writing began in the same manner. Writing then very quickly began to connect individual pictures with sounds and intentional things. What you see here on the screen is actually what we end up calling the entirety of the Hebrew Aleph-Bet, and that's in the far left-hand column of these charts. And if you walk through it, each one, and this is the pictograph version of the Hebrew alphabet, was a picture originally and had a specific meaning. One of the unique things about Biblical Hebrew is that each letter has an actual meaning behind it. And oftentimes, we will end up seeing that transposed or converted over into the language itself. For instance, right off at the very beginning, we have Aleph and then Bet. And Bet is something that you probably know, such as Bethlehem, Bethel, right? Beth Sheva. Bet means house, but it's the letter. So the letter B is also house. But we end up spelling it out fully in Hebrew with the bet sound, B-E-T, okay? And so it quickly moves from pictographs to being pictographs that have meanings, and so we can string these together. And the nation and the language that did this really well at the very beginning, of course, was Egyptian. Maybe you've seen some of these Egyptian drawings before if you like watching The Mummy or things of that sort, or archaeology of Egypt. These are very quickly thrown together, and not only are each one of these pictographs a word, but they can also correlate with sounds. And so this is really a very, very, very simplified chart that I've built for you right here, where we end up seeing, that I found for you, that we end up seeing how you find a cartouche and how we understand somebody's cartouche being enunciated. A cartouche is simply put a name placard, okay? But each one of these pictographs has an alphabetical sound to it, but also has a meaning behind it, which is really strange and unique in comparison to modern languages as we know it. Now, later on, we end up seeing alphabets developed, okay? So it moves from pictographs to ideas, and ideas are pictures. You string them together and you tell a whole story, to syllables, as we just did with the cartouches. Now we're taking those things and we're kind of stripping away some of the well-drawn pictures, and we're being left with the very basic outlines and cross lines of these letters, such as you see here. And we end up then connecting them to sounds that we end up knowing, or to letters that we end up knowing today. And so it would look sort of kind of like this. And so let's walk through the Hebrew alphabet together, okay? And so you see it right there. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf. And it carries on. Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Sade, Kof, Resh, Shin, and Tav. Now, One of the things that you need to know about this language, and I'm going to hit it again, okay, because again, you need to sound it out, read them out loud, okay? One of the things you need to know is that all of Hebrew is read from right to left. Right to left. Now, some people out there, such as my mother, are extremely dyslexic and naturally read right to left. When I'm tired, I read right to left naturally. My eyes do that. And so maybe for that reason, I took to Hebrew better than Greek. I don't know. But you need to train your eyes to read from the right side of the margin to the left versus English's left to the right. And so you'll have to work on that as you practice this language. And so we have, for instance, let's just go through these again. So now we're looking at the right-hand column and going down, and then the left column, okay? So we have Aleph-Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf. Then now up to the top left. Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Sadi, okay, Kof, Resh, Sheen, and Tav. And so those letters, I'm reading them right to left all the way through the entirety of it. Now, again, let me go back a page for you, but if we look at this, on these sounds, okay, these have a sound equivalent to English. And so as you work through this lesson, you're going to be told, hey, read these words. And all you do is just look at the consonants, and then you read them together. Now, Hebrew is written in what we call block letters. Block letters. Now, those of you that have taken Old Testament and have studied some of the historiography of the Israeli people or the Hebrew people, you'll know that block letters, as you see here on the screen, are actually borrowed from Aramaic during the time period that they were taken off into Babylonian captivity. That's perfectly fine because the block letters look very similar to what we call Proto-Hebrew, which is an older type of writing, okay? Block letters, there's no distinction between capital and lowercase letters. They're all looking the same as you see here on the screen, okay? Modern Hebrew does have cursive, and really it's because they write very fast. They're not coloring it out as you see here. Now, if you had like a fountain pen, by the way, you could easily write them looking like this. But if you have just a standard pencil or pen, it's going to be very difficult to write your Hebrew letters like this. And it's going to tend to be more of a cursive type of methodology within the text. Now, the Hebrew alphabet has some very unique things about it. It is a consonantal language, meaning that all of the letters that you see here are consonants and not vowels. And I can hear one of my Old Testament profs saying, yeah, but Mario, what about the ayin? What about the aleph? What about the yod that you see on here? Well, these are what we call silent letters. The yod is not silent, but the aleph and the ayin are silent. What they tend to do is take whatever vowel point is placed below or above the letter to being the sound of that particular letter. As you see here in the text, okay, we have three different concepts of the silent aleph on the left column and the silent ayin on the right column. The silent aleph on the left column, we have Avraham, okay. Then you have Asa, and then you have Asaph. Then on the right column, we have the silent ayin. We have Eden, we have Ezra, and then we have Arava. Now, these letters, as you can hear, you have Av. Now, naturally, if you have a silent A, how would you sound it out? Well, it's probably going to sound something along the lines of an A or an or a hum even maybe. Or something along those lines, okay? So they are silent letters, and historically, the biblical text did not have these vowel points, and we'll talk about that in a further lesson to come. So there's also letters that have what we call final forms. They will change how they look, okay? And so the first one that we're looking at and considering here is actually the kof. The final kof doesn't always maintain that C type of shape, but it grows a long foot, as you see there, malek. And again, as I said before, this is a name that is a portmanteau, right? Portmanteau, and it's Melchizedek. Melchizedek. Okay, Melchizedek. So we have the C gets a longer foot and it becomes the K sound or the C sound, but it looks different because it comes at the end of a word. We have the MAME. MAME will look different if it comes at the end of the word. It will actually close fully, as you can see there in the text. So for instance, as we have here, Adam, it closes the text, but it's still the M sound. The sounds don't change just because they've taken on their final form. The noon also takes on a final form, and it will have an elongated foot, as we like to call it. It will elongate to the ending. It doesn't change its name. It just means that it's at the end of a sentence, or a word, I mean. For instance, we have the name Nathan, right? Nathan. Nathan here gets the long-footed N at the end of it. It still stays an N type of sound, but it does change how it appears. We have the pay. The pay will also change its foot to having an elongated foot. Pay can either be the P sound or it can be the F sound. For instance, I'm part Filipino. Philippines is spelt with a PH, Philippines. But if you are writing about Filipino people, you write it with a F, Filipino people. Well, pay is both in Hebrew. It is both the PH and the F type of sound, but it does get that elongated foot whenever it comes at the end of a word. So we see Yosef, okay? And so we'll talk about his name and what it means later on as we get to the Yosef principle. Last, we have the side right here where it gets the TX sound or TZ sound maybe. Maybe it sounds kind of like a ringing cymbal if you have the jingles on it, okay? And so we have uts or uz, okay? But again, it gets that elongated foot as you see there because it came at the end of it. And Job lived in the land of Uz or Uz. It doesn't change the sound of it, it just changes how it looks. Another thing that we need to pay attention to in regards to the Aleph-Bet is sometimes these letters will have what I like to call a belly button within it. Yes, like this cute little girl staring at her belly button. What is that for? I don't know. Some letters will end up getting a Dagesh within it. And that's what we call the belly button looking thing in some of the letters is a Dagesh. The letters that often take the Dagesh are what we call the Begad Kafat letters. And you see right here, the Begad Kafat letters are the Beit, the Gimel, the Dalet, the Kof, the Pei, and the Tav. Okay? And they take these on. Now, if they take on a Dagesh in the Begad Kafat letters, it changes it from being a softer sound to a hard sound. Okay? Softer sound to a hard sound. Now, for the Gimel and the Dalet, frankly, and for the Kof, frankly, we as Westerners will struggle to enunciate those being any different. Nevertheless, my friends that live in Israel or that speak Arabic or other languages like that, they can make a different type of sound for that type of a thing. So if you see the Dagesh there, it's changing how those letters, those specific 6 letters, are enunciated, okay? If we look at these, right, so it can go from being a B to a V. Here, let's make this big for us. So the Beit can go from a B or a V. If it has the Dagesh in it, it makes it strong. So we have Boaz. Whereas if you don't have a Dagesh in it, it's a V sound, such as Tel Aviv, or Avri, okay, Ivri, meaning Hebrew. If the Pei has a Dagesh in it, it's a P with a hard P sound. If it does not have a Dagesh, it's the PH, the soft F sound. Okay, so we end up having Persia with a hard P, or we end up having Yosef with the F type of sound if there is no Dagesh. Last, we have the Tav and the Tav, right? Tamar versus Ruth. Tamar versus Ruth. So you have the hard T or you have the TH. This is not something unfamiliar to those of us that speak English, because in English, we have the letter C, which could be pronounced as a S or a K, such as in circle or carrot. It's the same letter. It's C in both instances, but we have a letter that does vary in its enunciation. Hebrew just happens to have more of these letters, and the giveaway will be that little belly button there called the Dagesh. So within Dagesh, there's two Dageshim. There's the Dagesh Linné and the Dagesh Forte. The Dagesh Linné and the Forte. Dagesh Linné is the one that really gives us that hard B or V. It changes it, right? It changes it between the K or the S, right? It changes the Tav and the TH. It changes the PH and the F. It gives us those different types of connotations of enunciation as we had talked about, okay? But Dagesh Forte doubles the letter. Dagesh Forte, it will take a singular letter and say, enunciate it in double. For instance, right here, we have shalom, you have a double L. But if you notice there on the far right-hand column, there's only one lamed noted, but it has a Dagesh there because it's the Dagesh Forte. It doubles the sound. Manasseh, we have a double sheen type of sound, but you only have one sheen there, but it has that Dagesh in it telling you, say it with two S's, hence why in English, Manasseh has two S's in its name. Other interesting things that happen to the biblical language and the biblical Hebrew is that there are some that do look alike in the Aleph-Bet. These lookalikes often become quite difficult for early readers of the Hebrew language, but you will quickly learn to distinguish between the two of them as you practice reading out loud and reading slowly and listening to other people read. And of course, there's online resources that we'll talk about on another point in time. Lookalikes are here. We have Kof and Beit. They look alike. Nun and Gimel. They look alike. We have Tav, Chet, and Hey. They look alike. We have a Samik and we have a Mame. They look alike. We have a final Kof, a Resh, and a Dalet. They look alike, but they don't sound alike. So you need to pay attention to these. We have Ayin and Sadeh. These two are very often confused whenever I have my students reading out loud. We have a Vav and a Zayin. Right? We have these there. We have a final noon and we have a vav. Those look very similar. We have a final noon, and sometimes people confuse that with a final kof. We have also letters that sound alike. We have the tav and the tet. They both make the T sound. We have the kof and the kaf. Okay, they both make the k sound. We have the samik and the sheen. They both make the sound, okay? This is the biblical alphabet. And I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I want you to do the exercises, read them out loud, and it will really help you if you read the biblical language names as you practice the language before your friends, at home, before your roommates, or just practice it before the Lord so that you might learn to enjoy the biblical language and God's word in your life today. Be blessed.